Welcome everyone to the Weird Wolf Unchained podcast, a pre-existing branch of Weird Wolf Entertainment. And I'm Bran,
I'm Lynn.
and today we're trying something new for us. Obviously, it's new. This is a brand new channel.
So what this is he wants me to watch horror movies with him.
I don't want you to watch horror movies with me.
Well, you want
I know
somebody
you
to,
can't.
but ideally you would like me to watch them with you, so you have someone to talk about them with.
I might have somebody. I've replaced you.
But the point is, you like to talk about them. But I won't watch them, but I will read them. So
Maybe.
I read this one.
You did read this one. This was a good pushy one, I think, to start with.
So what we're going to try to do is see if we can have the discussion about the movie he wants if I haven't actually watched the movie but only read the book.
Yeah. So today's book is The Hellbound Heart, and movie form is Hellraiser.
By Clive Barker.
Both by Clive Barker, because the movie was written and directed by Clive Barker in his earlier heydays. Oh, old man noises. So, anyways, we decided to start here because The Shining's a long book, which is what you wanted to start with. I want to read some Stephen King stuff on my own, but I don't. I'm reluctant to, and I don't want to buy anything. But I'll read this.
Well, you won't now. You won't now. I've written all over it.
I will too. Maybe I'll put my own notes. Anyways, so I suppose where do we want to start?
You wanted to start with characters, or so you said.
That was a good place, I thought. Or should we do a general premise real quick?
Sure.
See if we already get some breakdowns there. I'll read off of the IMDb. Go ahead with yours.
Frank Cotton's insatiable appetite for the dark pleasures of pain led him to the puzzle of Le Marchand's box.
I think it's merchant, like merchant.
Yeah. I was trying to get it to sound right, but it didn't come out my face right, because I know it's French.
It doesn't really come up. It's the llama configuration, I think. So, anyways, it comes up later in the movies.
The D is silent. That's where I keep messing it up. And from there to a death only a sick-minded soul could invent. But his brother's love-crazed wife, Julia, has discovered a way to bring Frank back. So the price will be bloody and terrible, and there will certainly be hell to pay. I like that. I didn't read this before I read it.
Would it have changed your mind on it? Because that's one of the things that I convinced you to do with books, is to not read the summary before you read it, to read the book and then.
Well, you were part of that. And I'm glad, because I've had several books come up that were spoiled by the summary, so.
So I'm going off of IMDb, but some of these are written by people. I'm just going to read this one. When Christy's father Larry and stepmother Julia move into Larry's childhood home, Christy and her boyfriend take a room nearby. Unfortunately for all involved, Larry's house is already occupied. Before the family's arrival, Larry's disreputable brother, Frank, used a supernatural puzzle box to summon a gang of other dimensional demon sadists. Now Frank requires a series of blood sacrifices to escape the clutches of Pinhead and the Cenobites. Yeah,
I'm just going to say that sounds completely different. Like, so different. I'm not sure this is going to work.
Well, that's why this one's kind of an experiment, because if this one doesn't work, we'll try again. At least it's practice. So, anyways, got characters. So, I didn't do any, like, minor background characters. I just did, like, the ones that have a purpose or seem to have a purpose or are there most of the time. We've got Frank, Larry, Julia, Kirsty, Guy, who finally gets a name. A little bit of a spoiler. 5 minutes before the end credits in the movie. It really is like they wrote the movie. It was like, let's have this guy in here. Oh shoot, we forgot to name him. Just yell out a name at him. Steve works. And then Creepy Bum. And then I also wrote down the Cenobites because they're important. You have Pinhead, Chatter, Butterball, female. Yep, that's her name. And Scorpion Hangy Baby Thing.
How many Cenobites was that?
1, 2, 3, 4. I guess the Scorpion Hangy Baby Thing counts because he comes along with them, but he's not. He's just kind of there for a couple jump scares.
I think you might have more characters than I did. I only wrote down characters that have more than one speaking line.
That's kind of what I did, because like the doctor and the nurse, like, oh, you're awake, I'll go get the doctor. And the doctor goes, oh yeah, you can call your father, you just need to sleep first. And it's like, that's it. And there's like some other just NPC characters.
Because this only has 4 characters, and then the Cenobites who are not named.
Which is one of the differences between the two. How many Cenobites were there?
4.
So that's essentially what there is.
And then there's the engineer, but he doesn't show up until...
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read that book.
The very, very end. And I hardly call him showing up at all, honestly.
All right.
So I would not call what he did showing up.
What kind of descriptions did they give for the Cenobites? Do you remember? Because Pinhead, everybody should know Pinhead. He's the guy who has all the nails in his head. Or pins or whatever.
I kind of thought that Pinhead was going to be the engineer, the main one, or whatever. But I guess not. Pinhead is just one of the Cenobites that shows up.
Yeah, I don't think the Cenobites really...
But it's just...
aren't given any proper character or anything, right?
No, it's an it, because it's unknown if it's male or female, with tattooed grid lines with a pin at each intersection.
So that would be Pinhead. Cheddar from mine has his mouth kind of like open like the dentist tool or whatever, but it's stretched back and wires pulling it back. And he doesn't have any eyeballs or a nose.
Gross. That would probably be hooks that transfixed to the flaps of the eyes and were read by intricate systems of chains passed through flesh and bone that exposed the lower lip and were teased by the motion of the glistening meat beneath.
No, nobody really fits that in the movie.
Well, that's who I got. I've got a Cenobite like that.
Butterball is just a large Cenobite who wears these super cool glasses, like Ozzy Osbourne style, kind of real close to the just round, but they're almost goggle style and they're kind of embedded in his head. He just wears a full black leather suit. It's not open like everybody else's is, exposing flesh and tornness and stuff. So he's just a fat Cenobite.
I don't think we've got fat Cenobite. It's just scars covering every inch of their bodies, flesh cosmetically punctured and sliced and infibulated, then dusted down with ash.
And some of that might have been changed too because budget needs or trying to do the practical effect, whatever would look super creepy but was still possible.
I think this is also left kind of vague to leave it up to your imagination to make it as gross as possible.
Because in the female, she's bald. She's got like a piercing hair, I think. And she's got like this weird sun like arch thing that comes in through her cheeks. And she's not really that creepy. And they get a lot better with some of the other ones down the road. Like that is definitely something that gets, well, not always gets better, but a lot of times gets better as the movies progress.
Oh, I guess this might be the fat one then. So heavily scarified, the wounds nurtured until they ballooned.
Maybe. Could be.
Could be. The only one that's described that could possibly be female is actually the Pinhead one because it has a voice that's light and breathy like an excited girl. But they're genderless otherwise.
Yeah, which I think they're kind of intended to be in the book. Like how Candyman in The Forbidden is just a bunch of colors kind of floating around, vaguely human-shaped.
But then there's the fifth one, the engineer that only arrives should the moment merit it.
Which, I mean, the general premise, I think, is the same for the book and the movie. Frank escapes and the Cenobites want it back, which would warrant the engineer. I would guess. So anyways, are we just going off my notes then?
Yeah, we'll just go off of your notes and see if I can keep up.
All right, so we have the movie opening with Frank sitting across from a guy, and he's working out a deal to buy the puzzle box. And then he takes it home and opens it. Hints a little bit at what happens. Frank gets some hooks shot into his hands. And then it shows the aftermath, Pinhead putting the pieces of Frank's face back together on the floor. Then Pinhead resets the box and everything returns to normal. Frank's attic room thing.
Well, there's a kind of flashback to Frank getting the box, but it's not how it starts. It starts with Frank just fiddling with the box and getting it open, because he's been working to open. It's his new addiction. Till he gets it open, and then the four Cenobites come out. They talk, and then his senses ignite, and it all kind of just happens in his head. All the pain of the sound being too much, the sight being too much, and then when he finally comes out of it, I guess this is where the female Cenobite is, because she's here at the end of this. She's just sitting on a pile of rotten heads, and then we can begin, cut to black.
So, I mean, a little bit of differences there, but pretty much the same.
Yeah, because nothing actually happens to Frank in the beginning. It's all in his head, all kinds of mental, just overstimulus pain. No hooks or faces falling apart or anything. She just sits on a pile of corpses, their tongues all fall out, and cut to black.
Nice. So, then in the scene in the movie, it pulls out of the room and like goes down the stairs, and that's our transition. That transition leads into Larry and Julia entering the house. I guess we forgot to do this when we talked about the characters. We'll take the time out. So Frank is sadistic, kind of deviant, sexual deviant.
I put he was a libidinous criminal. And the
Big
opener
fancy words.
And the opener of the box.
But he's a dude who's very much into pleasure and sex, and that's kind of what the story's about, or why he's getting the box is because he's heard the stories about it being a portal or whatever.
Because he's gotten bored with everything he's had so far. Nothing satisfies enough.
And then Larry is Kirsty's father, and Julia is her stepmother. Oh, I think that's why I didn't do it, because my summary talked about that.
So Larry is not a character in the book, and Julia is Frank's sister-in-law.
Which would be Larry's wife. And Kirsty's stepmother.
So Larry is Frank's brother?
Larry and Frank are brothers, yeah.
Alright, Larry is Rory.
Okay.
Alright, now we're on the same page.
Anyways, so as I was about to get to, we find out through Larry and Julia's conversation, kind of, I guess, that it's Frank and Larry's childhood home, because Larry's talking about Frank. He wanted to sell the place. He hadn't been there in like 10 years. And, Frank kind of stops in and out of the house every now and again. And it's been empty, and they're just going to move in. Because that's the thing you can do. But after his mother died, obviously, he wanted to sell it, but Frank didn't want to. And just because I thought it was an interesting thing, and to see if there's any description of the book, I wrote down, excuse me, in my notes that it's decorated with odd religious statues. And Julia doesn't want to move in at first.
All right, Julia doesn't want to move in because it needs a lot of work because it's been empty for so long.
Yeah.
Since Rory's grandmother died. But I think it's just because it's been left so long. I don't remember there being any weird religious symbols.
Statues.
Or statues.
Yeah. I didn't think it would go into that great a detail.
Yeah, it's just because it needed a lot of work.
And I think in the movie, I think they're just there to show Frank's obsessiveness and how weird he is or something. I mean, it's 1987 and I was going to look at that. Yeah.
And yeah.
And yeah.
But that's actually the first time Julia hears the bell is while they're moving in. While Rory and the guys have gone back to their old house for another load. Kirsty's over and Julia doesn't like her.
Yeah. So you're jumping a little bit ahead of me.
I'm still to the moving in part. Because that's when Julia first hears the bell.
Yeah, but I haven't gotten to them actually moving in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like, they're just exploring it right now. So, kind of the next scene, Julie is exploring the upstairs and finds Frank's room. She calls Larry up, and it's done in a way to, like, oh, there's something up there, but it's just she found Frank's bread. And then she digs through his trunk and looks at a bunch of pictures and stuff and takes one of them because she likes it. And it gives a little bit of an implication that she's infatuated with Frank. And this also helps her decide that she wants to move in.
I didn't jump ahead because that's exactly where mine is. They've moved in. It's the first time she hears the bells because she had to step outside because she was frustrated with Kirsty. And then she goes back in, still avoiding Kirsty, goes upstairs to Frank's room.
So they're just kind of out of order here then. Because mine takes up, they go to look at the house, and he's trying to convince her to move there. And this is when she's like, okay, we can move in. And then the next major scene is them moving in. So it's just a little bit out of orderness there.
This isn't when she finds the pictures either. That's later when she's unpacking. Because they're in Rory's thing.
Yeah, that, she's not in that room when she finds Frank's bed. It's a different room. In the movie. Because this also, Larry calls Kirsty again before they move in. And is like, hey, you should come check out the house, blah, blah, blah. We want you to move in. And she's like, no, Dad, I found a room. I'm a big girl now.
Kirsty is Rory's friend who's in love with Rory.
Interesting.
And hates Julia because Julia isn't good enough for Rory, but all that irrelevancy. But different relationship here. Kirsty's in love with Rory, not daughter of Larry.
Yeah. So, like, that scene breaks up. And then we go back to Julia, who's still thinking about Frank, and she's reminiscing about a hot night that she had with him. And that just completes the information that she's infatuated with him. And then, she finishes that thought. And then we cut to Larry helping the movers move a mattress in. And there's Julia and the Larry scene, or like her thinking about her hot night with Frank, is intercut with Larry in the movie as they're moving in. So like the thrusting and pulling on the mattress kind of happen at the same time. And like you see the nail sticking out of the wall and you're like, oh, he's going to cut himself. And he does. And then he goes upstairs and interrupts her thinking. And like he cuts himself bad. Like when I cut myself.
Yeah.
With the, like, worse than that on a nail. It's weird. But, his blood then drips on the floor, a lot of it, and starts the resurrection process for Frank.
So Julia's infatuation started with Frank just hearing stories about him, and then they had the affair, and that's when she probably should have realized she wasn't in love with Rory. But she keeps going to Frank's room, which they keep locked because she calls it damp, so they won't use it.
Mm-hmm.
But she keeps going up there anyway.
Which is, and her infatuation is more than just an infatuation. She's like obsessed with him.
Oh yeah, she becomes obsessed with him.
In the movie, in the initial flashback where you see that, like where she first meets him or whatever, shortly after their wedding, apparently, and it's loosely implied that she's heard stories about him, maybe. Because like, I'm Brother Frank.
Because she's like obsessed with Frank and she's becoming bored with Rory and it's causing problems in their relationship. But the door slams and he cuts his hand with a chisel.
Makes more sense.
And he runs upstairs because he's a pussy and he can't stand the sight of blood. And bleeds all over the floor and starts the resurrection process for Frank.
So, and I figured it would be a little bit different in the book. And again, like, this is one of those things where decisions might have been made for pacing reasons or budgetary. Who knows? Maybe Clive Barker just wanted to do something different in
the movie, did they show the floor with the blood rolling across the floor and boiling into the wall?
It doesn't boil into the wall. It just kind of seeps through the floorboards because there's like this weird cocoon thing underneath for some reason. Like maybe it's a dimensional transition. It's not really made clear, but it like goes down and into the heart, and the heart starts beating, and then the floorboards start creaking and lifting, and lights coming and smoke, and
oh jeez.
Then kind of the reverse, a bunch of goo starts bubbling up through the floorboards and becoming a body slowly. And this is a really cool effect from other movies around the same time where they like made a wax mold and would like melt it, and it's kind of the same. And then like for the movie they would show it in the reverse, and it like, I don't want to get too much into like reviewing the movie itself, but
I figured it might be something visual like that because in the book it's just later when they come back, Julia says, "Did you clean up the blood?" And Rory says no because she didn't either.
Bum, bum, bum. So more of a like what happened kind of suspense instead of going for straight body horror.
Yeah, because it's not till later that the wall opens up and she sees a mutilated body that talks like Frank.
Yeah. So later that night, maybe another day. I don't know. It's not really, time frame's not really made clear. And the movie very much like bounces from one plot destination to the next. So it's a very choppy movie.
So does the book.
So, and again, like, I think this is one of Clive Barker's earlier works in general anyways. Because, like, he does become a very good writer. And it's more than just...
Well, it's good for what it is. But that's not the point. You were saying?
Yeah. After the body comes up and kind of reforms a little bit and makes this weird corpse thingy, I'm not sure how much it's supposed to be. Because, like, CGI didn't exist and they probably didn't have the budget for a good puppet. So they had to make this man look like it was a corpse that was just recently resurrected. They're having a housewarming dinner party.
We're having a party too.
And Kirsty meets Guy, this random guy, at the dinner party, and they're making oogly eyes at each other.
Huh,
and
Neville.
And he's showing off his cigarette flipping in his mouth tricks. Because what that mouth do?
So not his herpetology knowledge?
He doesn't talk at all in this scene. Like, they literally make eye... Or no, he does talk. No, I'm sorry.
Cat breeding. I'm sorry. Cat breeding, not cigarette flippies.
They're making eyes at each other first, and then she needs a refill. And she's like, "Don't give me too much, I won't be able to walk." And he's like, "So why don't you lay down?" And that's his only line in the scene. And then Julia isn't feeling well, so she dismisses herself. But really, she just wants to go upstairs and think about Frank and touch herself, is what I wrote down. But she does go up into that room, and she discovers Frank's resurrected corpse thingy. I wrote there's blood all over and goo all over the place, but I think that's... Oh, no. There is a mess of blood and goo on the floor where his body came back up, and there's rats eating it and stuff. He's unable to walk here sometimes, but sometimes he is. I don't understand fully what's going on.
Well, he's not even there yet.
I think there's some scenes that they had shot for later and still wanted to use, so they just put him in. That's what it seems like to me. But that's the movie itself thing. So, but he's like, hey, I'm alive. I escaped these things, but I'm not going to tell you about it. But Frank's blood brought me back, or Larry's blood brought me back. So obviously I need some more blood. Will you help me? Because in some of the flashbacks, they set up this, I'll do anything for you. And so will you do anything for me? And she's a little grossed out at first. But then she comes back and she's like, yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, so Frank isn't even back at this point. The wall opens up when she goes upstairs after the party and she sees him, and she can only make out, says it's Frank, says her name, and says blood, and she infers herself that she needs more to get him more blood.
Oh, so Julia's a bit smarter.
Julia's a bit crazier. I think it makes her more interesting, than what I've heard from your movie.
Yeah, the characters aren't fleshed out well in the movie.
I mean, they're not really fleshed out.
But I mean, there's not really
either.
room in the book to flesh them out either. I mean, that's 180 pages?
160.
160, and it's big print, so it could probably be about 130 pages. Anyways.
I mean, she's a little grossed out, but not even enough to hesitate. She's all like, she'll just get him more blood and then he'll be perfectly fine again. And he'll feel indebted to her. Is her drive.
Okay. No, she just wants to bring Frank back in the movie so that way they can be together.
That then he'll do anything for her.
I forgot this part. Cuts to Kirsty and Guy walking home, because like I said, he doesn't have a name. And there's a creepy bum guy in between these big sliding doors just staring at them. And I only bring that up because he just randomly appears throughout the movie.
I wonder if that's the engineer, because he only appears at the end of the book as a bum guy who crashes into Kirsty and gives her the box, because she has to be its keeper now. And that's the only time the keeper shows up. The engineer, not the keeper.
Okay.
Sorry.
But then, we cut back to Julia after she's laid there a little while, and she's like, yes, I'll do anything for you. And then Kirsty has a dream about her daddy dying. This is one of those movie things just to foreshadow, I guess.
Yeah.
Or just straight tell you this is going to happen. And it's at this point in the movie that we're about 30 minutes in and kind of just cut to the second act.
This is the point where we flash back to Frank getting the box. Quarter of the way through the book.
Yeah. So I'm a third of the way and you're about a quarter of the way.
I don't know math. It's 60 out of 160. So you math that.
I don't want to.
Okay.
So then the next major thing, like I said, it just kind of, this is the end of the first act, into the second act.
And now we go to Kirsty going murder crazy. Not Kirsty, damn it, Julia going murder crazy.
Shows Julia going to some bars, whatever, and she's going to meet a guy for Frank, so that way he can have some blood. And they get back to her house, and she's kind of reluctant. I think maybe it's because she just wants to get to doing the real dirty deed, not the adult deeds. And she's not sure exactly what she wants to do. And she's like, okay, fine, let's go upstairs. She's not wanting to kiss him or anything. And he's like, but this is what we came here for. And she's like, oh, you know what? You're right. Suppose we should go upstairs then. And she takes him into Frank's room where he did his ritual thing with the box. I'm just saying ritual thing because it's not really. It just makes sense, I guess. Yeah, I think she just wants to get to the murder. So she takes him upstairs and they're kind of messing around a little bit.
As she takes all his clothes off so none of the blood is absorbed by it?
She's like, you should take off your jacket and stuff. And he's like, that's a good idea. And he takes off his jacket and I think his pants. And then he's like, you should do the same. And then they start kissing. He's like, darn it, I drank too much liquor. I have to go pee. And she's locked the door, and he goes to open it. He's like, did you lock the door? And she smacks him in the head with a hammer. And then he turns around, and he's like, what the fuck, you crazy bitch? You just hit me with a hammer. And she hits him in the face with a hammer and jacks his jaw up. And then she hits him in the head again, and he falls to the floor, and Frank gets his pudding because he eats his meat. He uses his finger straws and sucks out all of his blood, but you don't really see that. That, like, it's implied at first, and then, like, the last kill actually shows it. And now he has more muscles and stuff, so he can actually stand. And he's also like, super gross now, because like all the plasma and blood is just all over his body, because he doesn't have any skin, or whatever. I don't know. It's just one of those things to make him look gross.
Well, she just makes him get naked and then gets a knife and stabs him, the poor little lamb, because she calls him little lamb and meat to dehumanize him so it's easier. And Frank still isn't there yet, so when he bleeds all over the floor, the blood rolls across the floor, boiling away toward the wall to evaporate. And then the body just withers, and then she has to take care of it, and she didn't think this far because she thought Frank would be there to help take care of the body, so now she's got to do it herself.
Does Rory come home at this point? Or does she just take care of the body?
She starts taking care of the body, and that's when he comes home, and she's like, oh, I feel sick. Go get me some brandy. While she takes care of the body. She just hides it in the attic.
So, in mine, she decides that she needs to take care of the body, so she picks it up, starts walking across the hall, and Larry comes home. He's like, Julia, I'm home. Sweetie, I'm home. Are you okay? And she's like, just quiet, and like takes the body across the hall to this storage room. Like, there's furniture and stuff covered in.
Yeah, that's where she hides the body.
And hides the body in there. And then goes into the bathroom to take a sponge bath, because that's how you clean up blood off of yourself properly. And then Larry comes upstairs. He's like, are you okay? She's like, oh, I don't know. How about you bring me a brandy?
So the brandy's the same.
And taking the body across the hall to this weird storage room.
Because this is when Rory calls Christy, and he starts going, I'm worried about Julia. Will you go check on her for me? Maybe see what's up. Talk to her, woman, even though you guys don't get along. But Kirsty loves Rory. That happens later
in the movie.
Kirsty loves Rory, so she's like, yeah, I'll go do it. And that's...
Well, so in the movie here, the next thing we see is Christy is working in a pet shop, and she's having an argument with a lady because something wasn't right, but it's not clear. And the lady's like, I want to talk to a manager. And she's like, manager isn't here right now. He's at lunch. You're going to have to wait. And she's like, oh, excuse me. I have to go deal with this other thing because the creepy bum guy is eating crickets.
Nope. Frank just goes, I need more. Go get me another body. And they just jump to Julia's next kill.
Yep. And Julia goes and gets another guy and brings him back and kills him.
And now Kirsty comes home just as she's killing him.
And she gets evil hair.
Comes over.
She does. Like, her hairstyle changes, like the slick back on the sides. Like 1980s into 1990s evil woman. Slick back on the side, poofy on the top.
But when Kirsty comes over to, check on her like Rory wanted, Julia's being all shifty, and she thinks it's because she's cheating on Rory. So now Kirsty's going to start watching her.
Well, so she's up talking to Frank, because again, in the movie, he's just straight up back. And Frank has the box in his possession somehow, and he explains what happened, and then we get to see what actually happened with him, kind of. So, like your opening scene.
That all happens inside his head?
Yeah.
Because we never actually get to see anything gruesome happen up until the end.
So then, my next scene is Larry's watching boxing, and Julia doesn't mind the violence anymore, even though we didn't know that was a thing. So it's like, oh, she didn't like violence before, even though Larry doesn't like blood, and she was like, okay, let's just deal with this. And then they go up to have adult time, and there's a thunderstorm, and Frank's going all over the place and being crazy and loud because he's impatient and wants to come back. And while they're getting their pregame on, find out that he was hiding in the closet when they were looking around the house. Or let me back up a little bit. They go upstairs to check out the noises, and Julia's trying to distract Larry with sex. So then they go into the room and start playing around, and Frank comes out of the closet and he's got a rat and he's cutting it. And she's like, no, please don't. I can't bear it. And like freaking out. And then Larry's like, what is wrong with you, woman? Just what is wrong with you? And he storms off.
So lots of that happens, except for Frank just watches while they do their thing. And then Julia starts yelling at him. And he's all like, I want a radio and bread
Oh, so Frank's
and
back
ginger in syrup. Yeah, he came back after the first kill. After she moved the body, when she goes back in there, he's a shadow in the corner because I don't want you to see me.
Yeah,
which is a good thing because he's gross.
He does in the movie after he comes back. When, like I said, he's this corpse thing, but like he looks like he has more skin on him than when he gets all of his muscle and under tissue back. It's, I mean, again, like I get movie style. But anyways, cut to daddy-daughter time with Larry and Kirsty. And this is where he goes, hey, Kirsty, I'm a little worried about Julia. Can you go talk to her? I know it's hard because you guys have this tenuous relationship. But can you try for me, please? Woman to woman.
Yeah, been there, done that. We've moved on to stalking her ourselves because she's cheating. Or so Kirsty thinks.
Well, and then Julia brings another guy home. And Kirsty sees it because she's going over there to talk to her. And Kirsty sneaks about the house while Julia's got the guy upstairs and has already bonked him on the head with a hammer. And Frank is eating him. And Julia is out of the room. Usually she just stands outside. I forget exactly what happened here. I didn't write it down. But Kirsty ends up going up there. And the dude bursts out of the room a little disfigured from Frank eating him. And Frank pops out and grabs him and sticks his finger straws in his neck to keep consuming his blood. And then gets Kirsty into the room and the door shuts. And she finds the box and he's like, no! And she's like, you want this? This is bad acting too. And she throws it out the window and runs downstairs and pushes past Julia because she came back probably to take care of the body because, like, all right, I know how long this takes this guy now. And as she's running out the front, or running past in the front, she grabs the box. And then it shows her walking down the street and she's in shock. And she just kind of leans against the fence and passes out.
And then goes to the hospital. Yeah, this is actually the first time the box shows back up, as it's mysteriously in the room when she's looking for something to grab to fight Frank off because he's trying to be a dirty old man.
Yes, and he's doing that with Kirsty, which is even worse because it's his niece and
Come to daddy.
Come to daddy, which is in the movie too.
Well,
he says, come to daddy.
Well, it's an important line.
It is an important line.
Just like the bells are important, but not
Apparently
in the movie.
not.
Apparently not. It's actually my favorite part of the book, and it's not in the movie.
The bells?
Yeah.
So we're about an hour in, and it's time for Act 3. So Kirsty wakes up in the hospital, and I already described the nurse and doctor scene. The nurse is just sitting there watching this weird program on the TV, waiting for Kirsty to wake up, and it's just flowers blooming. Like, there isn't anything that they could have gotten to put on the TV. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there that's open. I mean, shoot, everybody uses Night of the Living Dead because it's... What is that?
Yeah.
Public domain.
Public domain.
Yeah, there's plenty of public domain stuff out there that they could have used. But anyway, so she wakes up, nurse goes and gets the doctor. The doctor's like, calm down, you just need to take a nap. After you take a nap, then you can call your father. And the doctor and the nurse leave, and Kirsty has the box, and she's like, oh, what's this thing? And she starts playing with it, and she opens it.
The nurse gives her the box. She's all like, this was with you. It had blood on it. We've cleaned it. Do you want it? And she says yes, and then it intercuts the hospital scenes with Julia and Rory.
Might have happened. Nope. The wall opens up, and she enters this weird hallway, and there's a baby crying in the hallway. Like, you can't see it, it's just baby cries. And she's just walking down the hallway now trying to find this baby that's crying. And boom! The scorpion hangy baby thing.
Boom Cenobite.
Yep. And it chases her down the hall, and she gets out and back into her room, and the wall closes up. And then the walls start shaking, and light comes through where the mortar is and the bricks, and then the rest of the Cenobites appear. And you get Chatter and Pinhead and Butterball and Female. And then naturally Kirsty's scared, and they're like, we're gonna mess you up and stuff, and she's all like, no, and she begs like a normie girl, and then tells them about Frank, and she offers him up in her place. And Pinhead's all like, maybe I'll accept these terms, but if you're lying to me and you're trying to betray us, I'll rip your soul apart. It's actually a really well delivered line in the movie. It's like the best thing. That's why it gets used in everything.
No, she starts playing with the box, and then we cut to Julia yelling at Frank, what are we gonna do now? And Frank's all like, I need a skin. And he blows her a kiss. And then we're back to the hospital, and she's playing with the thing. And then the bell starts ringing.
Yeah, and then we cut to Frank and Julia talking about how he can't get a skin even though he's eaten all these people. Because there's 3 in the book too, right?
3 kills?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, like, a little bit of blood brings his corpse back. A full next body gives him his muscles and stuff and his nerves, and then he has some more and nothing else happens. Pretty much. But either way, he can't get his skin back, and they decide that he's going to take Larry's. Like, they don't outright say it, but it's very heavily implied in the movie.
Now they cut back to Kirsty, and it's not Pinhead, it's just another one. Just why I couldn't understand why Pinhead's in the movie so much, because he's not in the book so much.
Well, yeah, but again, budget and effects and all that. Like, it would cost a lot of money to make a whole bunch of different Cenobites.
Oh, you opened it in ignorance, but there's no help for it. Can't seal the schism until we take what's ours, and then that's when she offers up Frank.
That's kind of the same thing in the movie.
Yeah, she's just got to get Frank to admit it. Say his name.
So Kirsty leaves the hospital and comes back to the house to talk to her daddy, Larry. And somehow she's not able to recognize that this is Frank.
Yep, somehow, not until he says, come to daddy.
Yep, but they take her upstairs because he's like, Frank showed up and I had to deal with him. God, it was a mess. And she showed Frank's body in the middle of that room. Because, like, Larry in the movie is, like, covered in blood. Like, around here where he probably cut it open to put it on.
Yeah, he's bruised and the skin is plowed up in the book. So I don't know how you can't know that it's a guy wearing a skin suit. And the bell tolling gets louder, of course, because the bell's my favorite part.
So then the Cenobites arrive, and they're like, we want the man who did this. And she's like, but that's my daddy, you can't have him. And so she runs away from them and runs into Frank, and then they're talking, and he's like, come to daddy. And she's like, oh, you are Frank.
You are Frank.
Yep. Then Julia grabs Kirsty to hold her for Frank, but Kirsty moves out of the way because Frank opens his switchblade and he's going to stab Kirsty. And she moves out of the way, and he stabs Julia instead, and then he finger straws her.
Yep.
And he's like, well, you served your purpose.
Yep. Julia's screaming, and then suddenly the bells are no longer in Kirsty's head, but are actually outside, in the house, in the world.
Bum, bum, bum.
Hey, I love the bells.
I'm not making fun of them. So then Kirsty's still trying to get away from Frank, and she runs up to Julia's morgue, but Frank's no dummy. And Kirsty waits until the coast is clear, but Frank's no dummy.
You said that.
Wait for it. And he scares, and like he pops up after she leaves the room, and he flips his blade open again and scares her, and she runs into the other room, and the Cenobites come out. And the gig is up, Frank. And they rip his soul apart. I mean his body. They rip his body apart. And they do this by hooking him up all over the place. And it just pulls and he explodes and rips into pieces and stuff. I thought I meant to write in there that Frank is a dummy.
Yeah, they come then to, Kirsty runs all over the house and hides all over the place first, waiting for the Cenobites to show up, but she thinks they're just being
mean
dicks and waiting for Frank to kill her so that they get both of them. But she forgets that he has to admit that he's Frank, so she starts this ridiculous conversation. He's all like, I'm Rory now. Till he says, it's Frank. And then the bell begins again.
Oh, and she gets him to confess or whatever in the room.
I don't know why he calls her a cheating bitch, but he does.
And then, oops, the Cenobites are going to take her anyways. So Kirsty runs out of the room. Yeah. So Kirsty runs out of the room and she goes to Larry and Julia's room. And Julia's on her bed and she's been face-offed. And she's holding the box for some reason. So Kirsty grabs the box and she unsolves it. And she, one by one, is putting the Cenobites away. I mean, she's running through the house a little bit. Yeah, this actually, now that I'm watching it and being more critical of it, is just dumb. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to myself.
If she could just get the box and put the Cenobites in that way, why didn't she do it in the first place with the Cenobite in the hospital room rather than making the weird deal? It doesn't work like that. That's not how it works.
And then guy shows up and she has a name. It's Steve. And she says it a whole bunch of times.
Well, the book ending is much better.
Let me go ahead and finish off mine. So she's put all of them away, but they go to open the door. And then boom! It's Scorpion Hangy Baby thing. Bye-bye. Because she finishes solving it and puts them all away. And Steve is such a good guy, he gives her his jacket because it's cold outside. And then the house starts on fire. And then there's just piles of burning ruins in this empty lot. So she throws the box into one of these little fires. And then the creepy bum comes up. And he walks into the fire and he grabs the box. And he burns and turns into a demon thingy. And he flies away with the box. The end.
Alright, so the book ended a little bit differently. Just a little bit. So I'm with you up until they're in the room with Frank and he said his name and admitted who he is. And the bells begin again. The hooks fly out. And Frank almost gets to stab her, but the hooks stop him. And he's pulled out, spread eagle, and then ripped to pieces.
Yeah, I think he almost gets to stab her in the movie too.
And his neck and chest are plowed open. And the knife drops from his fingers. And the Cenobites tell Kirsty to go.
Leave.
No, they don't say leave, they say go.
Leave us.
Go. So she starts running out of the house after, looking back to watch Frank die. Because they do say go before they rip him to pieces. And she hears a sudden cry. And she looks, and it's Julia. And she somehow put her wedding dress on. Somehow. And she's calling her Christy. So she goes to help her, and Julia's like, help me. And that's when she realizes that her head is not attached. It's in her lap. And she doesn't know how she's talking. And she's still going...
I often question that when you see decapitated heads in movies and they're talking. If they're a spirit, it's a little bit different, but then I remember it's a movie and I just go with it.
Asking to help me, and Christy's all like, yeah, I'll help you, I'll dash your head in. But then the veil starts lifting up, with invisible fingers. And it turns so bright she can't even look at it, and a voice says, I'm the engineer. And then instead of waiting, like she's been doing this entire time, she's finally stopping to look at things while fleeing the house. She keeps running outside, and she expects the house to be in all this turmoil because it's shaking and bleeding and all this stuff while she's inside it. But when she gets outside, it's silent. No bells, no bleeding, no wolves, none of that stuff. And that's when this guy comes walking and bumps into her. And when she looks, it's a figure that's just got a flaming white fire head and she knows it's the engineer, and he's given her the box, and she's now its keeper. And when she looks at the box, she sees the ghost faces of Julia and Frank.
Nice.
And that is that.
A lot different than I remember the first time I read the book and watched the movies.
So, that was the summary. Part 2 will come out with it, so it's a separate part, so you can listen to the summary separately if you've already done it, which you'll put in the description.
Sure.
So I don't need to say it right now. But I'm already saying it, so it's too late. You have to listen to it.
Well, it doesn't hurt to say it because there's a lot of people like me who don't read the description unless there's something interesting.
True. We probably should have put it at the front.
We didn't know we were doing that, though. I didn't know that you were going to do that part.
Well, we've made it so long, we have no choice.
Yeah, I know. Well, and like so this is an experiment, so we're just kind of playing around to see how we're doing it.
Yeah. So if this does get posted. Part 2 will be where we talk about his weird questions that he likes to talk about with horror movies the best we can.
Okay.
Okay.
Come back for that. Thanks for listening. And yeah.